Hari Hari. Non-duality, as it is propounded, described, taught here in the West, or in modern times even, is very different from the Advaita Vedanta of Shankara Acarya. I have followed, listened to many teachers of non-dualism, sometimes also called neo-advaita. I will use those two terms synonymously for the sake of this discussion: non-dualism and neo-advaita. And while I have not listened to all, there are countless teachers, proponents of non-dualism, those that I've heard and followed and appreciate for their sincerity. I do not fault their sincerity, nor do I question their motivation. Who am I to do so? So, considering their sincerity and that their hearts are, in that sense, purely motivated, I have found that the teachings, descriptions of non-duality, neo-advaitism, falls far short of Shankara Acarya's Advaita Vedanta. Non-dualism, as I've heard from numerous teachers, waters down significantly the teachings of Shankara Acarya's Advaita Vedanta. It allows for individuals who have a post-traumatic stress issues with religiosity, and by extension dualism, but with religiosity in particular, to attain or pursue a spiritual lifestyle without having to deal with religiosity because of the trauma and the failures of religion and the trauma that religious institutions and religion has put society and individuals through. Non-dualism provides that sincere spiritualist, the sincere seeker, to make spiritual progress, to have a spiritual component, or to add a spiritual component or facet to their existence, to their life. But in allowing that, in making room for those persons who have this trauma with religiosity to take shelter, if you will, of non-dualism, the essence of Advaita Vedanta is removed. It has to be. So non-dualism now becomes a wonderfully comforting process of spirituality. It is devoid of religiosity and all that entails. And it nourishes and it feeds our individual desire and quest for spiritual enlightenment, spiritual attainment, spiritual growth, because after all, we are, as Chardin would say, spiritual beings having a material experience. So non-dualism nourishes that, nurtures that. Unfortunately, because non-dualism has to cater to our issues with dualism in spirituality, it necessarily removes essentially the ultimate goal of Advaita Vedanta, which we will come to. But the problem that entails, or the problem that then gives rise to, is that non-dualism becomes this merry-go-round of spirituality. If you listen to teachers of non-dualism, you will, if you are honest with yourself, you will hear this merry-go-round of spirituality, where it's very difficult, and even in their teachings, they will say, well, the finite cannot understand the infinite. That is really, in my opinion, a cop-out. In the sense that it then precludes us from asking the question of, where am I going? When do I, how do I, where do I, what is enlightenment? What is spiritual attainment? Nothing is measurable. So that statement wipes away all ability for the individual spiritual seeker to know, to glom onto, for lack of a better phrase, to understand, to tangibly experience spiritual development. And what unfortunately happens commonly is a number of things. Individuals, sincere spiritual seekers, simply think that they're missing something. They're somehow not getting it. If they just try harder to understand, to see the non-duality, to see the I am that-ness of existence, to see the non-differentiation between myself and the world. If I just try harder, I'm missing something. So then they try harder and harder to understand, listening to one non-dualistic teacher after the other, after the other, after the other, and asking the same questions of all of them and getting pretty much the same answer. The finite cannot understand the infinite. It just has to, something you really just have to see and understand. It's all intangible. So you have this merry-go-round of information coming out of non-dual teachers that doesn't tangibly satisfy the sincere spiritual seeker. But it does give solace. It does give comfort. It does nurture the sincere seeker's desire for some kind of spiritual water to quench the thirst of their spirituality. It does offer that, but not much more. It offers a little cup of water rather than complete satiation, which is what Advaita Vedanta of Shankara Acarya does indeed do. The Advaita Vedanta of Shankara Acarya gives satiation, but it forces the spiritual seeker to confront our trauma that comes from duality. That's what Advaita Vedanta does. It makes us confront duality from a spiritual and enlightened space. So the traumas we have with religiosity, spiritual teachers and gurus that have caused havoc, priests that have caused havoc, bishops that have caused havoc, so-called spiritual teachers that have caused chaos in individuals' lives and in the lives of the world. We are forced to overcome, to deal with and move through those fears, those traumas. That's what Advaita Vedanta of Shankara Acarya forces us to do. Non-dualism simply gives comfort, spiritual comfort, as we sit on this merry-go-round of teachings that don't really get us where we really want to go, that we're craving to go. We know we're not there. there. There's no such thing as there in that sense. But there's no tangibility in non-dualism. There is an Advaita Vedanta, but it is not there in non-dualism. So the non-dualist seeker becomes either frustrated and drops it altogether, or simply thinks they're not trying hard enough, which in non-duality makes no sense. There's no such thing as not trying hard enough in non-duality. So in that sense, they really have nowhere to go. They can't try harder because trying hard is not part of the non-dualistic process. There's nothing to try harder about or for. Yet they're still not getting it. But then there's nothing to get. So it becomes this merry-go-round. And if you're honest with yourself as you listen to non-dual lectures and teachers, the sincerity I'm not questioning, because they are offering. There are nuggets, there are spiritually nurturing bits of information that's being passed along. It is keeping us in a world that is figuratively and literally on fire. It gives us solace. It gives us a place to be centered, and hopefully a place from which we can then go into the world and affect change. It does provide that. Non-dualism. But Advaita Vedanta, the Advaita Vedanta of Shankara Acarya, provides much, much more. Much, much more. It is the express lane to self-development, reaching our greatest potential as individual beings. And it's quite interesting that in India itself, the subcontinent, Vedic spirituality, for the most part, has actually gone beyond non-dualism. It is only in the Western hemisphere, modern society, where non-dualism is now becoming the mainstream. And in fact, much of Vedic spirituality is seen through the non-dualistic lens. Indian spirituality is now seen as a non-dual philosophy, which in India, it is not. Non-dualism is a minority philosophical view in India. Philosophically, spiritually, it is the minority position. It only has prominence outside of India, where the world has been subjected to the violence, the suffering, the horrendous crimes against humanity perpetrated by religions. Vedic spirituality does not or did not have an inquisition. There were no crusades in Vedic spirituality. None of that is there in Vedic spirituality. In the Western world, we have centuries of religiosity perpetrating crimes against humanity. Yet we're yearning, because we are spiritual beings living in a material reality, we are yearning for spiritual meaning, spiritual connection, spiritual growth, and reaching our greatest, highest spiritual potential. Religiosity has failed. There's a philosophy, non-dualism, that allows us to nurture, even if on such a small level, our spiritual craving, to slake our intense thirst on a small level, without having to worry about the issues of religiosity and duality on that level. We take that and we cling to it. We expand it, we emphasize it. But the problem is, it's just a huge and enormous merry-go-round. And we removed it from Advaita Vedanta. In the next video, we'll go over Advaita Vedanta. Hari Hari.